Hi, welcome to Superhero Rundown. I'm Lady Jess, and you guys remember when I said we were going to talk about Nazis? Well...
Hail Hydra.
Hail Hydra!
Close enough. I mean, I know we're going to have to talk about it, but there's still a few episodes before we get there. So when we last left our team, they were after the evil capitalist bitch Ian Quinn, and they are now on an undercover mission complete with obligatory Stan Lee cameo. Remember the 084s, the ones I brought up in the last episode? Well, Sky and I think on the same wavelength because she asks Fitz about them. And I really like this same story from different characters' point of view aspect to this episode in general. It's a lot like a story of a tragedy or a success from the different people who experience it in real life. Each person experiences the events, but they have their own point of view and they can hear other points of view, but they only experience theirs. The aspect of this half of the season that I really like is taking initiative when you believe you're the only one left to do anything. What do you do when you think that you are the only one to stop them, even without superpowers? In Sky's case, it's to stop Quinn because she doesn't know the rest of the team is coming, and for her trouble, she gets shot in the stomach. Twice. And that leads into the next episode, and something people have experienced. What do you do when your loved one is in danger of losing their life because of a major surgery? Do you grieve? Do you wonder? Do you try to understand as you wait for the best/worst news to come through that door? You wrestle with the question of, do you keep them on life support? You want to do everything you can to save them, and for Coulson, he can actually accomplish this with the bus. So off they go to find some miracle drug that brought Coulson back to life, and they want to use it to save Sky. Is the drug like the mist that the Inhumans are exposed to? I'm sorry, I'm such a nerd. But in all seriousness, what are the consequences some of us could experience with a miracle drug? Could the miracle part of the drug stop? Could it have adverse effects? There's a million questions with this kind of thing. But apparently, wrestling with Asgard is much worse than any of this. That's right, Coulson kind of doesn't want to deal with Asgard ever unless it's Thor. So, since Thor hasn't shown up yet and Hawkeye is confirmed for Captain America Civil War, let's talk about the aspects of Asgard and the effects it has on our discussion here today. Now, in the same episode with the train and the awesome storytelling, Coulson tries to help Ward with the hollow thing in the science area, and gets nowhere. In the very episode where Asgard has found their way to us, Lady Sif tells Coulson that Asgard hasn't had this system for years because it's an antique. Technology! How do we describe Lady Sif?
She's a warrior. I saw her fight in New Mexico with Thor. Climbed a giant metal killing machine, speared it with her double-bladed sword. It was pretty badass.
Thanks, Coulson! But seriously, this episode explores the battle of the sexes, as it were. In the previous episode, when we were introduced to Triplet, we get man talk between him and Ward, and this is the reason I hate man talk for any length of time. In the very next episode, we see Lady Sif talking about it.
Sorcery. She bends and shapes the will of men to her own purpose.
Only men? Her powers don't work on women.
No. Men have an inherent weakness we do not share.
Plus, this episode passes the Bechdel test. When May and Sif discuss their sex, and then Sif drops a bombshell about doing her duty and May needs to do what needs to be done. Now, Lorelai herself controls men through their desires, and orders versus desires happens to be a very common theme associated with this episode. And the cool thing is, Lady Sif and Lorelai embody those things, not men. So kudos to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. But here's the part where we have to talk about characterization, especially when things are about to go HYDRA.
Holotable on.
I don't know who you are. I don't know what you want. If you are looking for ransom, I can tell you I don't have money. But what I do have are a very particular set of skills.
So nothing has changed with Ward, in case you were wondering about that. Just that he and May are apparently still sleeping with each other because that won't end in a fight in the last episode. I'm jumping ahead again. Coulson and Sky seem to have a father-daughter relationship here at this point, and Fitzsimmons are growing closer together as people. So good for those four. Also, May has to say something about Coulson.
If Coulson thinks there's a chance in a million to save Sky, to save any of us, he'd take it.
Now that that's out of the way, Mike Peterson is now Deathlock and still watches over his son, in case you were still interested in that little plot thread, or even if you weren't, he's sticking around for the rest of the season, so yeah. Also, Tahiti is not a magical place, as we discover. In fact, when asked about it in the next episode, Coulson responds with,
How was Tahiti?
It sucked.
and now we're about to descend into HYDRA. So brace yourselves, it's about to get a lot more Nazi up in here. Now we move to the pseudo-villain for the season, the Clairvoyant. What does he have to do with the Nazis? Well, he works for HYDRA, but we won't find that out until episode 17. But the Clairvoyant isn't all-seeing, as we learn, just a high-level S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, not as high as Director Fury with its level 10, but high enough for most security clearances. And with the Clairvoyant came a few questions. The first of which is, are failsafes really necessary? I mean, in the world of superheroes, you don't have to worry about these kinds of things because, let's face it, some of these heroes can live through some shit. But in the real world, we don't have super soldiers. Yet. And because Steve Rogers isn't running around all Captain America-like in the real world, it begs the question of why you would want to install failsafes when the human risk is great. To protect that? Or is the information so vital that it can't fall into the enemy hands? Even if it did, what could they do with it? Another question is questioning orders and what it can do. Perhaps get you killed, but some military operations do go in all willy-nilly. They don't think twice about the human cost, especially today in these drone strikes. Human lives aren't lost physically by the person operating the drone, but there might be a psychological or emotional toll. In other words, what price is being paid for following orders, and is that price too high?
You're lying to him.
I get why you did it. When you get orders, you don't question them. You follow them, no matter the price.
Yeah, well, this price was too high. I lost him. Coulson doesn't want me here. He doesn't need me.
Okay, but what about the Clairvoyant? I mean, how do you find somebody who doesn't want to be found? Especially when they are 2 or 3 steps ahead of you. So the great idea in episode 16 is the double-blind mission. Is everyone on an equal footing if you don't know the whole mission? Do you keep it a secret from your teammate? And when you find the villain, what happens when he gets shot and it's revealed that the wrong man was shot? Is the Clairvoyant still out there? Not only that, but what happens to the guy who shot the wrong man? Is he a murderer or someone following orders?
See you after you died, because you yourself could not see. You were simply a broken man who did not know he was broken.
The Clairvoyant says this to Coulson, but this is interesting because it can be deemed the Marvel Cinematic Universe looking at mental health and the implications of what Coulson's multiple operations have done to him. Now, I might be grasping at straws here, but here's another thing. What happens when you actually lose your identity? I brought this up in the last episode.
Mike Peterson's dead.
But now, Mike Peterson has gone from hero to misunderstood to unfortunate experiment to victim to murderer in the span of a season. Can you lose your identity as a person? Can you actually die? Like, your name dies, but you become a killer named Deathlock because they have your son and are using him against you. Now, earlier I mentioned that the Clairvoyant was determined to be an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. So what does that mean for the organization? And more importantly, what does it mean when Coulson thinks May is communicating with the Clairvoyant because of a line in a cockpit when she's informing on Coulson to Director Fury? Especially in the very next episode when we get HYDRA. I mean, Victoria Hand suspects that Coulson is HYDRA until Garrett confesses that he's the Clairvoyant.
I wouldn't say I'm a true believer. Let's just say I felt the wind changing direction and swung my sail. You really should too.
I would die before serving HYDRA, you sick son of a bitch.
I mean, Coulson? How can you guys suspect him? He worships Captain America in his trading cards. You guys should fucking know that. Now, what exactly does HYDRA do?
The worst thing you can do right now is to underestimate HYDRA. They hide in plain sight. They earn our trust, our sympathy. They make us like them.
Wow, that sounds exactly like Garrett did this season. And by the way, in case you missed it, Captain America is dismantling S.H.I.E.L.D., so he's not around because he and Nick Fury and Falcon and Black Widow are kind of busy. And because of HYDRA, S.H.I.E.L.D. is being questioned, especially when Nick Fury is feared dead, because he's Nick Fury, so why the fuck is everybody worried? But anyway, the US government wants answers, and in case you missed that, Ward is also a HYDRA agent because fuck that guy. Now, what happens when you've been labeled a terrorist organization? And what exactly is right from wrong to you now that you're on the fringe? You didn't know what the hell was happening, but someone has to pay for it. So Coulson has S.H.I.E.L.D. erase the team's identities. And by the way, throughout all this, all the agents are being compared to Agent Romanoff, who in fact is a woman. So kudos to Marvel for letting Romanoff being the benchmark for all the badass in this universe. Coulson, meanwhile, speaks to his convictions.
I swore an oath. We all did. To serve when everything else fails. To be humanity's last line of defense. To be the S.H.I.E.L.D.
And what S.H.I.E.L.D. does.
It's also our job to determine right from wrong. Watching someone in agony, searching for the truth, not saying anything, that's wrong.
Even in the face of HYDRA. Well, May comes out with the truth about what's been going on. But yeah, and in terms of S.H.I.E.L.D., Coulson has already been absolutely selfless, sacrificing relationships himself, and still believing in what S.H.I.E.L.D. stands for. And speaking of relationships, let's get into the relationships of this half of the season, starting with Coulson and his cellist. He protects her from her stalker even when she thinks he's dead, and doesn't tell her because she's moving on. She's healing from her life scars, and Coulson is fine with being dead to her to protect her and to let her keep healing. Meanwhile, with Nazi and Skye, she's being manipulated into getting back together with him because she doesn't know he's HYDRA. Well, at least until he kills Patton Oswalt, that is. Ward obviously has a thing for Skye, but he does manipulate her into taking off to go with him to go unlock that hard drive. And Skye, in turn, manipulates him right back, especially after, given that she does care about him, she discovers that he's HYDRA. So now that the cat's out of the bag on Ward, the team discovers the message left by Skye, and Fitz kind of loses it. Meanwhile, hi Mike, fancy finding you here pulling Skye out of a police vehicle while she screams in terror. And Skye kind of has to deal with Mike killing Ward and what she should do despite his Nazi crimes.
That is the twisted logic that they teach you when you sign up to be a Nazi.
Stop, wait. I'm not a Nazi.
Yes, you are. That is exactly what you are. It's in the S.H.I.E.L.D. Handbook, Chapter 1, the Red Skull, founder of HYDRA, was a big fat frickin' Nazi.
That has nothing to do with today.
You know, you always had that Hitler youth look to you, so it's really not that surprising.
It's not like that.
The whole following orders with HYDRA motif rears its ugly head in this episode as well, both by Ward and by Deathlock, while Skye is on the bus. Oh, by the way, in case you're wondering where May is during all of this, she went to Maria Hill to go talk to her about Coulson, and then she found this.
I know you brought me on to Project Tahiti because you trusted my judgment, and it's that judgment that's telling me I can no longer, in good conscience, let the testing continue. I understand you started the program to potentially save a mortally wounded Avenger, but the side effects are too extreme. We had initial success with the regenerative properties of the guest host tissue, but after the initial physical recovery, the subjects began to deteriorate mentally, displaying hypergraphia, aphasia, catatonia, or just complete psychosis. We don't know if it was the biology at play or simply the awareness of what was done, but the only course of action that showed any promise of stemming these side effects was memory replacement, erasing completely the awareness of what they'd been through, and even those results were very inconsistent. To be clear, I'm recommending the termination of Project Tahiti. Under no circumstances should these procedures or drugs be administered to anyone ever. The cost is far too great. Thank you, sir.
What do you do when you find out you were the one who was in charge of a project that brought you back from the dead? Even if it was to revive a dead Avenger. So Coulson was in charge of Project Tahiti. How's that for— what the fuck even, Fury? Now comes the question of vigilantism. Why? Because S.H.I.E.L.D. no longer exists, the Garrett thing is a personal vendetta, and it's kind of hard to be an organization when your identities have been completely erased. And speaking of personal vendettas, can a person be inherently evil? Just look at the reactions of Skye, May, Coulson, and Fitz when it's revealed that Ward has betrayed them. But Coulson still hangs on to what Fury told him.
But Fury always said, a man can accomplish anything when he realizes he's a part of something bigger. A team of people who share that conviction can change the world. So what do you say? You ready to change the world?
No. But I'm ready to kick some ass.
That works too.
As the team goes after Garrett, Ward begins questioning Garrett because he's crazy now. And if you missed that, Garrett has artificial body parts. He's just like Deathlock. Which If you want to be a super soldier, it would be awesome for people like Garrett, but Deathlock didn't really want this put on him, so how is that okay? It might have been to save his life. And besides, EMPs suck, as Garrett learns when Fitzsimmons comes on the bus. Only to be left to the ocean because Ward saw his affection for them as a weakness. Because he's an idiot. Because Fitz sacrifices himself for Simmons and they get rescued by Nick Fury. But for the love of gods, he admitted that he loved Simmons before saving her life. They contemplated death together. Fitz adores her and now we don't know his fate. At least until season 2. Now let's talk about Director Fury. Fury is actually reasonable in this episode. To an extent. Coulson and him talk professionally.
Sir?
You don't have to call me Sir Coulson. Look at me. I'm dressed like I live under a bridge.
What are you doing here?
Well, Simmons turned me onto that old-timey tracker Fitz left on your bus. I went to great pains to make sure you didn't die the first time.
Well, now's probably not the best time, but I'd like to have a lengthy conversation with you about that. It might get loud.
And I owe you that. But right now, we owe Garrett a punch in the teeth, wouldn't you say?
Talking about his one-man speech, Fury has seen the big picture in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He saw the Avengers take on an alien invasion on New York. Fury is someone to be counted on, but he is a douchebag as needed. The perfect kind of boss. Fury believes that Coulson proved himself to be an Avenger.
Aren't you? It was a break glass in case of emergency situation.
Yes, but that emergency was supposed to be the fall of an Avenger.
Exactly.
And Coulson understands that S.H.I.E.L.D. is meant to protect. And Fury hands over director chair to Coulson and they get reunited with Simmons. They also talk about rebuilding S.H.I.E.L.D. from the ground up with Patton Oswalt.
So, where would you like to start?
Can Coulson rebuild it into something better, though? Would he want to with HYDRA running about like Nazi assholes? And the two big things they leave us with as questions: who are Skye's parents and what's up with the map thing with Coulson and Garrett? But anyway, next time we're going to look at the DC universe. So join me in May for Arrow Season 1 and the consequences of being a better Batman.